Hello everyone, welcome to Clear IAS. I'm Kaustubh, an educator here. In this lecture series based on ancient Indian history, today we are going to do another very important theme, which is based on later Vedic period. Later Vedic culture is dated between 1000 BC to 600 BC approx. This lecture is in continuation with the last lecture that we have had on early Vedic period. You can also access the notes based on these two lectures by clicking on the link in the description given below. You may also like to increase the speed of this video for a better viewing experience at 1.5. So let us begin. The first thing that is important for us to familiarize ourselves with the sources based on which the history of the later Vedic period is understood. These sources are the Rigved, the Yajurved, the Samaved, and the Atharvaved. So the Rigved, it is basically related to the knowledge of hymns, of praises of various deities. The Yajurved is the knowledge of the sacrifices which were conducted to make the deities satisfied in order to get the desired results. There are many hymns in Rigved which have been put to metrical composition, and these metrical compositions are found in Samaved. So Samaved is related to the knowledge of the melodies. And at last we have the Atharvaved, which is related to the knowledge of the magical spells for different purposes. Now we do not have these Vedas in a monolithic form. Rather, they have been very diverse in nature. For example, we have different branches related to these four Vedas. The first branch that we are going to study is the Rig Veda's branch. It is called the Shakaliv Shakha, the Shakaliv branch. It is interesting to know that we have only one branch related to the Rig Veda that is available to us today. With regard to Yajurved, Yajurved is divided into two parts, the Shukla Yajurved and the Krishna Yajurved. Shukla means white and Krishna means black. Shukla Yajurved is related to only the mantras, whereas Krishna Yajurved is related to not only mantras, but these mantras are also accompanied with commentary. If we talk about the recensions, the shakhas or the branches with regard to Yajurved, we have Madhyadina and Kanva shakhas with respect to Shukla Yajurved, and we have Kathaka, Kapisthala, Maitrayani and Taittiriya shakhas with respect to the Krishna Yajurved. The Sama Yajurved has shakhas like Kauthuma, Ranayaniya and Jaminiya or Tavalkara. At last we have two shakhas Shaunaka and Paplad for the Atharvaved. It is also important to know that we would be interested in knowing about the very first manuscript that is related to the Rig Veda. We learned in the last lecture that Rig Veda, the Vedas, they were broadly composed from 1500 BC to 1000 BC, but especially the Rig Veda. But can we also know about the first manuscript which gives us the textual form of this literary tradition? You would be surprised to know that while Rig Veda was written between 1500 to 1000 BCE, the first manuscript is available to us only from 11th century CE, which is quite a wide spectrum of time. Now we also, besides these four Vedas, we also have supplementary literature. For example, we have the Samhitas. Samhitas related to these four Vedas. So the Samhitas are nothing but the Vedic hymns or mantras, and these constitute the very core of these literary traditions. Secondly, we have the Brahmanas. Now, this particular section on Brahmana is not to be confused with the social group that we come across later, but these Brahmanas are the texts which deal with the social and religious aspects of the rituals. Thirdly, we have the Aranyakas. The Aranyakas are the philosophy and symbolism of the sacrifices. Aranyakas are also called the forest books, and they deal with a lot of philosophical aspects which were explored by the seers who composed the Vedas. And last, we have the Upanishads. And Upanishads deal with not only the philosophy of sacrifices, which were made to satisfy the deities, but also with regard to the philosophy of body and the universe. All of these four parts of supplementary literature are important, with Samhitas forming the core uh, and Upanishads forming the important aspect of these literary traditions. Now, if we try and understand the territorial extent of the later Vedic cultures, we realize that the early Vedic traditions they were formed mainly in the northwest frontiers of the Indian subcontinent. But in the later Vedic period, the territorial extent of the Vedic cultures it expanded. For example, how do we know about the territorial extent of these Vedic cultures? We know the territorial extent by studying the pottery that we have available to us with regard to these traditions. For example, Rig Ved, with the Vedic traditions are mainly synonymous to the painted grayware cultures and ironware technology. So wherever we find painted grayware cultures, painted grayware pottery, we have assigned those areas to the time period which is synchronous with the Vedic cultures. And these later Vedic cultures they expanded to Uttar Pradesh with areas from Punjab, Rajasthan, and Haryana. We learned in the last lecture that Kuru and Bharata were the most important tribes in the early Vedic period, and here we see in the towards the later Vedic period, the Kurus occupied upper part of the Ganga Yamuna Doab. Doab is a term which is referred to the two waters if we can translate it literally. So Ab means water and Do means two. So Ganga Yamuna forms a Doab. So we have the Kurus occupying the upper part of the Ganga Yamuna Doab, which is the region of the Kurukshetra. Kurus occupied Delhi and they merged with the Panchalas from the middle Doab, setting up the capital at Hastinapur. This period is very important also because it is the period of the war of the Mahabharata, which is supposed to have happened around 950 BC. The war was so cataclysmic in nature that it destroyed the Kurus. Also, we have the map, which gives us a better idea about the territorial expansion of the later Vedic cultures. So we have had these northwest frontiers, which mark the very beginnings of the early Vedic culture. But now we have parts of Rajasthan, Haryana, Delhi, and western Uttar Pradesh, which have marked the territorial extent for the later Vedic cultures. Next, we are going to deal with the economy of the later Vedic cultures. So, the economy, it was basically derived from the use of iron in the Gandhar region and in the regions of Pakistan, which were very much visible in the burials, which and these technology, especially the technology of iron, it came to Western UP in around 800 BC. So this is how we mark the territorial extent and the economy with regard to cultures and history. Iron is also called Shama and Krishnayas in the later Vedic texts. If you would remember, in the previous lecture, based on the early Vedic cultures, we learned that the early Vedic cultures were mainly the copper smelting cultures. and they were mainly based on the production of copper-related craft work. Whereas in the later Vedic cultures, we have the presence of iron, which revolutionized a lot of things, as we would learn later. So here we have a couple of specimens with regard to the iron tools which have been found in history. However, these pictures are only for references, but these may not necessarily belong to the later Vedic cultures. But this is just to have a basic understanding of how these tools might have just looked like. We spoke of iron revolutionizing the later Vedic cultures, but it was mainly visible in the agricultural aspect. Agriculture was the dominant occupation, and plowing was also a very important feature of this particular economy. For example, we have references to plowing, which was practiced by the ruling authorities as well. For example, we have the example of Sita, the daughter of Janak. R.S. Sharma notes, historians like R.S. Sharma have noted that these kind of references, Sita was found while plowing the field, while Janak was plowing the field. Similarly, we have Krishna's elder brother Balram, who was also using plowshare as a major weapon. So we have these references which tell us about the importance of agriculture and plowing and use of iron and how these aspects were related to the egalitarian activities. Egalitarian means the e the nature of equality amongst various communities. With regard to agriculture, it is also very crucial to note that the barley was grown, but rice and wheat emerged as main crops. Rice was found for the first time in Doab region, and it was known as rihi in the later Vedic cultures. And also we see a confluence of two cultures, the iron smelting culture and the copper smelting culture, which shaped the economy of the later Vedic cultures. Whereas in the early Vedic cultures we had mainly the smelting of copper. Iron became more popular in the later Vedic cultures. Also, we have different kind of activities practiced by different groups. For example, weaving was a very important activity which was practiced by women. Now, with regard to economy, it is also very important that this period had more diverse forms of crafts. For example, the kinds of pottery that we find, which is associated with the later Vedic cultures, is black and red ware pottery, black slip ware, painted gray ware, and red ware. Red ware red ware actually preceded the later Vedic cultures, but it was painted gray ware which was very popular and which came to be associated with the later Vedic cultures. We have specimens to the painted grayware, and these are the sherds of pottery that we have been able to find with respect to the later Vedic cultures. Also, when we speak of economy, there were, as we have mentioned, that there was diversity of crafts. For example, jewelry making came to be a very important craft that was practiced, and the later Vedic time period is also important because a lot of historians have associated this particular time period as the beginnings of an urban life. For example, Hastinapur and Kaushambi were the proto-urban centers, and as we will see eventually in the next lecture, that the beginnings of the urban life were marked in 6th century BC when various other sects were also formed in response to the economy of the period. Now let us study about the political organization of the later Vedic cultures. So the political roles were assigned to different authorities. For example, Rajan was the supreme authority, and some historians have refrained from using the term king for Rajan, but have rather called Rajan as a chieftain or noble, as we have learned in the last lecture that the Rig Vedic polity it was mainly tribal in nature. Similarly, we have Gop or Gopati, who was the keeper of the cattle. As we have learned in the economy, based on the last lecture, that the cattle, the uh, rearing of the cattle was a very important feature, or rather a defining feature of the early Vedic and the later Vedic cultures. Now we have Purohit, royal priest, and the role of Purohit becomes very important because the Rajan, the chieftains used to practice the sacrifices. We also learned it in Rigved that there were several hymns in that literary tradition which were associated with the praise of the deities. Now, Purohit were the priests who were helping the Rajan in order to perform the sacrifices in order to praise the deities. In the later Rigvedic cultures, we realize that Brahmins they became very important section of the Purohits. But it is also very important to know that not every Brahmin could be a Purohit. Not every Purohit could be a Brahmin, but if and vice versa. We have to understand that not every Purohit was a Brahmin. So the Purohits they became very important because they used to help the king not only in sacrifices but also in the later Vedic cultures. We realize that the Purohits also had a political authority where they used to advise the chieftains based on the different political affairs because they could help the Rajan in order to have the desired results from the deities. So they had certainly a very strong political authority. Now we have Jana, which was associated with tribe. We had Vish, people from the clan, which was related to the people of the clan. And then we have Gana, which was associated with the lineage of the communities. And at last we have Gram, which was mobile group of people, which also later came to be known as a unit of village. If we have already learned in the last section that the smallest unit of the political organization was Kula, which was family, and the largest unit of the political organization was Jana, the tribe. Now, if we speak of the political culture organization of the later Vedic cultures, it is also important to note some of the basic institutions of the later Vedic traditions. The Sabha and Samiti, which were popular in the early Vedic cultures, were now dominated by men. Vidat, which has mixed features of both Sabha and Samiti, they had disappeared. Sabha, as we learned, a it was a gathering which was based on the views of limited number of people, and those were the elites. And similarly, we had Samiti, which was a more democratic feature of the political organization, which had most of the members from the communities. Now, we also learned in the last slide that we have now a better control of the priests. Why? Because these priests were helping the king in not only in performing the sacrifices to praise the deities, but also they were assisting the king to deal with the political organizations for a better control of the political grip. Then we have the transition from tribal authority to territorial control, as we saw that the expansion in the later Vedic culture, it was remarkable. So it was not limited to mainly tribal authorities, but now they were becoming more and more territorial in nature, and there was constant urge to expand the the if we can call it the kingdom. So much so that it was only during this period that we have terms like Rashtra, which appeared in this period for the first time. So Rashtra were again the unit of the territories, which has, as we can all see, which has transformed remarkably in terms of territory today that we use in context of nations. But at that point of time, it was in at a preliminary stage, which was associated with the larger territorial control. And these territorial controls were marked by different kinds of sacrifices again. So we see that sacrifices were very basic features, or very basic feature of the political organization of the later Vedic cultures, and these sacrifices have been identified as the Vajpaya sacrifice, the Rajasuya sacrifice, and the Ashwamedh sacrifice. And these sacrifices have enabled they used to enable the chieftains in order to expand their territory. So we see how tribal authority, how there was a constant attempt to expand the territories, and it was not limited to merely tribal authorities in Vedic cultures, in later Vedic cultures. Also, we have Sangrihatri for the collection of taxes. Taxation was not very prominent in early Vedic cultures, but in later Vedic cultures, it emerged as a prominent activity, and Sangrihatri was responsible for it. However, it is to be noted that we did not have a standing army yet in the later Vedic cultures. Now, if we speak about the society in the later Vedic cultures, we learn about one thing, that Varna system was gaining prominence since the societies were expanding constantly. So there were different kinds of stratifications also that were taking place in the societies. For example, we had these stratifications marked in terms of the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Shudra. So the Brahmins were mainly responsible for the sacrificial activities. The Kshatriya were mainly responsible for the warfare. The Vaishya were mainly the communities of the traders, and the Shudras were the communities which provided the services to the society. However, it is also important to know that these transitions were taking place in a very dynamic manner. For example, if we talk about the society in the later Vedic cultures, then there were certain sanskaras which were limited, which were which were associated with only certain sections. For example, the Upnayan Sanskara. They could be performed by Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. One may point out that Shudras were excluded from the Upnayan Sanskara, but it is also important that society was undergoing a lot of dynamism. While Shudras were excluded from the Upnayan Sanskara, they were a very integral part of the coronation of the king. So we see that it was not a monolithic feature in the society that we saw, but rather society was going in a lot of transition, forming its own new norms. Also, occupation as social status, it was also undergoing a lot of transition. For example, in the early Vedic cultures, we have the hymns which tell us that the families could have different people associated with different kinds of occupation. But there were certain occupations now in the later Vedic cultures which were gaining prominence. For example, the Rathikaras, the chariot makers, they were very important and even revered in the societies. So we see how occupation defined the social status, and to an extent, social status also had a very strong relationship and impact on the occupation. If we speak of the gender roles, then we realize that the later Vedic cultures they were becoming more and more patrilineal, and status of father was increased. How do we know that the status of father was increased? Because we have certain hymns where property was mainly controlled by the father, and he could actually exclude his own sons and daughters from inheriting his property. And we will see in the next lecture that this particular norm it was also challenged by a lot of characters in history. uh, the control of father on property, but we know that the control of father on the property was gaining a lot of prominence in the later Vedic cultures. Similarly, we have assumptions that the status of women was reduced, but it is also to be understood that we do find references in the Upanishads where women have engaged in philosophical debates, though their status was certainly eviscerated in the political institutions like Sabha and Samiti. But at the same time, polyandry and polygamy, we have different references to them, and also women could choose their own husbands. One of the most important institutions that was gaining prominence in the society in the later Vedic cultures was the institution of the Gotra. So the Gotras were basically the groups of people which belonged to same communities who had same share of cows. So we learned in the last lecture that economy it was basically derived from cattle, and how the different institutions of economy they were named after cattle. The root word was go, but there were several names given to various occupations, various forms of economic institutions. For example, we had Gavishta, we had Dohitri, which were related to different social and economic groups, economic concerns, but at the same time, they were related to cattle as well. So, institution of Gotra was also gaining prominence with respect to cow, but it was mainly a marker of the communities. Then we have Chaturvarna Ashram, which was also gaining a lot of importance in the later Vedic cultures. For example, the Chaturvarna Ashram, it implied that a person had to undergo four forms of occupation in life. For example, from the broadly the lifespan of a human being, it was divided into four parts. Assuming that a person would live for more than 75 years, then the first quarter of the life, from age 1 to 25, a person was supposed to focus on education and was supposed to practice brahmacharya. Then we had grihastashram, which was which was basically from 26 years to 50 years of age. Grihast were mainly responsible to take care of the family and the communities, and they were mainly associated with the economic occupations in the period. Then we had Vanaprasth, which was associated with the retirement, which was the age of 51 years to 75 years. And then we had Sannyas. Sannyas, though it cannot really be associated with the later Vedic cultures, not very strictly, because it came to evolve till the time we had the Janapadas, and it was constantly evolving. But sannyas was a stage uh, where a person was supposed to move to the forest in order to practice the penance. So we had Chaturvarna ashram. A lot of Western scholars, you would be interested to know that a lot of Western scholars they say that the uh, all the three stages of life, they were mainly they were mainly dependent on on the people who were practicing the grihast way of life. But it is also not true, because after a grihast person had transcended to Vanaprasth, it is important to know that somebody who was practicing Vanaprasth had also dedicated his or her life to the Grihast ashram and was feeding the students, was feeding the people who were practicing Vanaprasth and Sannyas. So this was a cycle where a person who was today practicing Brahmacharya, who was dependent on the people who were practicing Grihast ashram, tomorrow would be tomorrow would be earning his own livelihood or her own livelihood and would be feeding the other three sections. And similarly, Vanaprasth, when the same person retires to Vanaprasth, he or she was again dependent on Grihast. So it was a cycle of Chaturvarna ashram. Now we have religion in later Vedic cultures. So the religion in later Vedic cultures, it came under the Aryan influence, which were mainly marked by the sacrifices as a key feature. We learned how the sacrifices were performed constantly in order to gain the prestige in society and to gain control of the territorial expansion. So the, there was constant evolution of the pantheon of the deities. For example, deities like Indra and Agni, who were very important in the early Vedic period, they were replaced by a new deity, or not new deity basically, but another deity called Prajapati, because in the later Vedic cultures we find more references to Prajapati. Similarly, we have had references to a diversified pantheon where Rudra and Vishnu, they became they became I mean they these were the deities who were constantly gaining more and more prominence. Also, we have references to idol worshipping, which was becoming very important at this time. It was gaining importance, and sacrifices marked the very key feature of this particular time period. And the patron of the sacrifices were called, the patrons of the sacrifices were called the Yajmana. The Upanishads fostered the understanding of Atman and Brahman. So we have learned how the supplementary literature was also an important aspect of the later Vedic cultures, and Upanishads, they were very important feature of the supplementary literature which was associated with this time period. So Upanishads basically Upanishad, this word Upanishad is, it can be broken into three parts. Upanishad, uh, which broadly means etymologically to be sitting with a teacher and learning about various aspects. So Upanishads were very philosophical in nature, and they were now dealing with the broader concepts of Atman and Brahman. They were dealing with the concepts of the individual soul and the universal soul. Now, this was also the time where the early Indians were also ruminating about the concepts like birth and death, and the broader concepts of religion. And Brahman, it has also been understood as a monotheistic feature, as we learned in the last lecture, that monotheism was also a, an important feature in the Vedic cultures. So this was the lecture that we had today, and in the next lecture we will have a discussion on the rise of cities, the Janapadas and the Mahajanapadas. And in the next lecture, it is a very important lecture because we are also going to learn about Jainism and Buddhism. And we are also going to look at the previous year's questions based on these themes. which have been asked by UPSC for civil services examination. If you have been able to if you have been able to understand this lecture, so please like, share, and subscribe to Clear IAS. And till then, till we meet next time, study well. Thank you very much.